For many years, too many years, the people in the church have talked about marriage and only basically said the reason we're for it is because it says it in the Bible, or that's the right thing to do, and don't ask me why. Well, in the current environment we're in, we've seen what happened over the last 50 years. We need to talk about why. We need to talk about why marriage is the right thing and why it's so important. And so Glenn Stanton brings with him a wealth of information on many different topics, but the one he's going to talk about tonight is the one that you'll see that's in this magazine, and I believe we have handouts out in the lobby as well. So this won't cover the whole issue of marriage, but Glenn's going to do a great job of sharing with you. So I want to just, I know he doesn't need it, but I did print off from the who he is and what he does and how important he really is. We're really blessed that he's come here to join us. So he is the director of family formation studies at Focus on the Family. So he's one of the big guys at Focus on the Family. Does research for the Institute of Marriage and Family. He debates and he lectures and he comes to places like Bismarck, North Dakota. He did serve George W. Bush administration for many years as a consultant on increasing fatherhood. That's another issue we can talk about. Involved in the Head Start program. He is the author of 5 books, in which he has some out in the lobby. You may want to visit with him later on about why marriage matters, amongst others, and also The Ring Makes All the Difference, which I see he brought along. Explains the research findings as well as biblical wisdom on why cohabitation is not a smart idea for couples and their children. Glenn and his wife have 5 endlessly growing and amazing children, and they live in Colorado Springs. So, Glenn, share with us.
Thank you, David. You'll activate this from, is this on? Good, it's on. Well, good afternoon, good evening, and I am so glad that each of you came. It's a very, very good introduction from David, and David had mentioned the film Irreplaceable. I had a vast privilege of being able to be the co-writer of that. Me and another buddy at work, Leon Worth, we wrote this, we dreamed this up probably like 4 years ago. And this past Tuesday night, it went out in 700 plus theaters all across the nation. We got just a phenomenal response. In fact, such a good response that next Thursday we're having an encore showing in a lot of the same theaters. You can go to irreplacablethemovie.com, and you can look and see where movie theaters near you where they've shown it. But it's a documentary, and it really talks about what's happening with the family. It's not so much a bummer kind of thing. It does talk about some real serious issues, but it's a hopeful message as well about what is happening with the family and why we need to strengthen and promote the family. And then the documentary itself that was shown in theaters leads to probably the big part of the project, which we're calling the Family Project, and that is a 12-week small group curriculum that really does lay out and present a deep Christian theology of what family is, why God created us the way He did, and how He made us for family. And so that's something that small groups, churches, Sunday school classes will be able to get. It's very similar to the Truth Project that we did many years ago. Same sort of thing. There's not just one teacher, though. We talk to lots of different people. So, what I'm going to talk to you about tonight is the issue of marriage, but from a different perspective. In fact, a very provocative perspective. And the title of it is Marriage as a Feminist Institution. And we typically don't think, okay, somebody from Focus on the Family coming to make the feminist case for marriage. But I'll explain to you and show you how we do that and why we should understand it as a feminist institution, and how most of you already do in the truest sense of the word because of your own experience with marriage, either through your parents or your own marriage, And you've seen that what we're going to talk about is really absolutely true, but maybe you haven't put it together in this particular way. But before I start, I want to tell you a story real quick about my 13-year-old daughter. Tom said we have 5 kids. We have a 21-year-old girl. We have 17-year-old twins, boy-girl twins. We have a 15-year-old girl and then a 13-year-old girl. 13-year-old girl, Izzy, she loves to come up to Daddy's work. I don't know if you know it, but my workplace is the coolest place in the whole world. She just thinks it's fantastic. If she had to decide between Disney World or Daddy's workplace, it would be a tough thing. So she came up to work with me on Saturday, and I didn't want to go to work on Saturday, but she wanted to come up and hang out and be the secretary and things like that. So she did. And she's very confident, and she's very funny, and she gives me a hard time, and in just a real fun way. In fact, she said the movie that came out Tuesday night, it was really a fantastic movie except for that guy who helped write it, which was me. So she's kind of digging at me. But she asked me Saturday, Dad, have you ever considered what something more than a $10 haircut might do for you? I'm like, no, I haven't. I said, have you ever considered what maybe one of the commands in the 10 Commandments say about honoring your parents? And she had not thought about that either. I posted that comment that she said on my Facebook page, and I've gotten all kinds of good comments. And I told her I never would get a haircut like Justin Bieber, so she could hang that up. Marriage and feminism, okay? Now, we have 2 different views of women in the culture today, and we're very clear about what those are. On one side, we have a group of people, they're called feminists, and they care about women. They promote women, they defend women, they help women go out into the world and accomplish everything that they can accomplish. Feminists are the women's friends, okay? Over on this side, we have Christians, okay? Christians, I don't know if you knew, they really kind of do hate women. They make the women sit in the back. They never let them talk. You know, husbands are the heads of the household, so they make all the demands, and the woman does everything that the husband tells her to do, okay? Women in the Christian church, maybe even second-class citizens, you know? So those are the 2 views that we have on women. This is the very high, loving, caring view, and this is the just horrible, evil view, right? What I want to talk about is actually we have those 2 things exactly wrong. That feminists, radical feminists, have been most harmful to women more than anything has been in the last 40 years. And good. That Christians, properly understood, have been women's best friends. Okay, you've got the smart people over here who say that Christianity has not been good to women. Do they know their sociology or their cultural history? You know, China, women don't do so well there. India, women don't do so well there. In the Middle East, women don't do so well there. In communist countries, women don't do so well there. In Christianity is the one global belief system that took the radical position that women bear the image of God. Okay? There's no feminist anywhere that will say such a radical, dramatic thing about the value of a woman. Okay? And that Christianity, wherever it goes, it has elevated the role of women. It's just a clear, practical, historical fact, cultural fact. Now you have the feminists. And I want to talk about 3 things, tenets in feminist social philosophy that have been put out there that were supposed to be good for women. One was, if women are really going to be strong and dependent and independent, then they have to meet men on their own terms sexually. So they said, women, jump out in there to the marketplace, the sexual marketplace, and you just be as aggressive as the guys are. You know, that's how you're going to assert yourself. It has not worked. We have the hookup culture now, and we're going to talk about why this has not worked. But women are not like men. They are actually sexually more mature, more sophisticated, more reasonable, and we're going to talk about that. The next is abortion. And it said that women should and need to have the right and the ability not to be pregnant on demand, just like a man, you know, never threatened with being held down, held up by having to be pregnant. So they should have access to abortion. The other is that they should have access to the pill, which put contraception in their own hands. This would empower the women. Well, guess what happened? And we're going to talk about this just a little bit. There was an economist, George Akerlof, he's at Stanford, and he did a study on what was the impact of the pill, again, women taking control, being able to take control of their own fertility and abortion as well. What was the impact of that on shotgun weddings? Incredible study because of what shotgun weddings are. He found that at about 1967 to 1973, in there where the pill came along and abortion became in the Constitution, fundamental human right, as they say, shotgun weddings just dove, okay? Well, isn't that good? Because people shouldn't be forced into marriage at, gunpoint, right? That's not what shotgun weddings were. A shotgun wedding was, another name for it, the man doing right by the woman, right? Things happen, she's pregnant, I'm going to step up and I'm going to take responsibility for my actions. With the pill and with abortion, what happened? Okay? My sexual activity has a consequence. After the pill, it's like, you know what, sister, you could have taken the pill. In fact, you should have, and that's on you. Okay? And if your pill didn't work, then you've got abortion. I'm free. I got no obligations. And what George Akerlof was finding, that's what he wanted to investigate. That's exactly what happened. So the pill did not embolden and strengthen and set free the woman. It did set her free, basically, from the provision, care, protection, the stepping up and taking responsibility of the man. A little bit after that, we had something called the feminization of poverty. Do you know why? Mom has a baby, dad's taken off. Mom doesn't tend to do real well economically, okay? The next one is, first is setting sex free, being sexually aggressive. Ladies, that's what you need to do to be really independent and strong. The other is, you've got to have the pill, you've got to have abortion, and that's going to make you strong. The next one is, you have got to not marry men. If you want to be with a man, cohabit with him. That puts you both on equal level. If you want to leave and things get bad, boom, you're gone. Marriage is you chaining yourself to this man. Basically, and this is what the radical feminists say, is you are his slave. In fact, there's some of the really radical feminists who say that marital sex is rape because the man is dominating the woman and she can't go anywhere. But in cohabitation, she is an equal player. makes some reasonable sense, in a sense, but actually the opposite happened. And the book that I have for sale tonight, The Ring Makes All the Difference, chapter 7 talks about how cohabitation hurts both men and women dramatically, but it hurts the woman more. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight, that marriage is a feminist institution. And of course, when I say feminist, I mean that in the best sense of the word. It empowers the woman, that a married woman is the most powerful player in any society. She wields more power than anybody else. It's not the owners of big corporations. It's not the sports stars. It's not the novel writers. It's not the entertainers. In a culture, marriage helps women become the most powerful human force in the universe. And that's what we're going to talk about. And the way that we're going to get into that is we have to understand the nature of sexuality. Okay, think about this. Respond to this question. We go anywhere in the world, who knows what sex is, and who is interested in sex? Probably every hand will go up, if you're older than like 15 years of age. Sex is a human universal. Human universals are something, a term that anthropologists use to say that everywhere at every time people experience it and need it and have it. And they study these things. Laughter is a human universal. Song and singing is a human universal. Wherever you go, deep, deep, deep into the bush, at any time in history, you'll find that humans do these things. And there's quite a few of them. But sex, obviously, is one of them. Sexual desire does not have to be taught. Right? What does it have to be? We have to teach about it like fire, Here is this thing. It's wonderful, it's powerful, it surges within you, but you've got to be careful with it. Every society, and every society has pursued ways to put limits and controls on human sexuality. That's not just religious cultures or conservative cultures, but every culture has had to find a way to do that. Why? Because they find out when they just let it go, everybody doing their own thing. That idea just didn't come along in the 60s in America. When you let people do their own thing, guess what? Bad things happen. Now, I want to ask a question just here before we go on. Marriage, is it a Christian institution? Raise your hand if you think it is, if you say that it is. Come on. Yep, okay, some of you. Good number of you. Who wants to take a different position? We may think you're an atheist, but that's fine. Who thinks that that marriage is not a Christian institution? You guys raised your hand on both of them. You're cheating. Okay, you think it's both. Okay. Anybody else? You. Why don't you, what's your case for that? Why it's not? Okay. Ladies. Yes. Right. That's exactly right. Marriage, it's a bit of a trick question, but it's an important question. That if marriage were a Christian institution, then marriage would not exist prior to Pentecost or the coming of Christ, right? Or it would only be in places where Christian missionaries have gone and said, okay, this is how we do family life. But it is a human universal. It exists in all cultures at all times. So it's exactly what you said. It's like, okay, is sunshine a Christian thing? Well, God created it. It's a good. We need it. It's a gift from Him. Water, these are common graces. Marriage is a common grace. And there is no place we can go to where they don't have something called marriage. Now, they enter into it in different ways, but basically, it's a permanent, exclusive union between men and women, okay? Every culture at every time has that. And in fact, anthropologists tell us that they don't know a time that they can look at and say, okay, before this time, we didn't have something called marriage in human experience. Now we do. It's just, they'll say, it's as if it always existed, like from the first two people who were ever created. I mean, it's remarkable to hear them say those kinds of things. Okay, we need to talk about, in thinking about the power of a woman and the nature of family, we have to think about the nature of sexuality. The nature of sexuality, two things. Humans are relational creatures. That's one of the things that we talk about in the movie Irreplaceable and then in the 12-week curriculum that is coming. God said, it is not good for man to be alone. It's not just a Christian idea or a Jewish idea, it is a human idea. No human can exist without other people. Next is humans are gendered creatures. I get to speak a lot on college campuses, and I give this line, and I know what is going to happen as soon as I say it. And I say this, that I come here tonight to talk about same-sex marriage and the same-sex family with this basic fundamental truth, that humanity is divided into two parts, male and female, and they both need each other, and they both depend upon one another. And there is no third option for humanity. The place erupts in equal measures of laughter, booing, and anger. Okay? Because what I just said is utterly ridiculous based on what they're learning on the campus. One time at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, I said exactly that. And it was this huge hall, exactly. They're not real big on there's just male and female idea, okay? So I'm at the podium, I go up and I say this, and again, this place is huge. And I say that, and the place erupts, as I knew it would, in just boos. But they hissed me too. I've never been literally hissed before, okay? So what I did was step away from the podium, and this is important to do. When people act crazy, you call them on it, but you call them on it in an easy way. So I step back and I go, okay, let's just capture this moment. I just said that humanity is divided into two streams, male and female, and they both need one another, and they're both distinct from one another. And you guys booed and hissed and just went crazy. You know? It's interesting, they taped that talk, and then I listened to it later and wanted to hear kind of how that part went. They edited it out. And they edited it out because they know, you know what, we weren't acting like adults in that way. This is a quote from she's not crazy radical, but a radical secular feminist in France. And she wrote a book called Parody of the Sexes. But she is admitting and making the case that there is only male and female. She says, humankind does not exist outside the double form of masculine and feminine. The human species is divided into two, and most other species into only. In other words, every individual who is not a man is a woman, and vice versa. There is no third possibility. Okay, in academia, this was a radical book. Because she's saying it is just obvious and simple that whenever you go anywhere and meet a human being, they're either going to be some variation of either a male or a female. And there's a zillion different ways to be a good female, zillion different ways to be a good male. But that's all you'll ever find. And folks, that's how crazy it is out there. I like to say we are not in Kansas anymore. And books like this get published because it's a provocative statement. Now, the next is humans are sexual creatures. They're relational creatures, they're gendered creatures, male and female, and they are sexual creatures. Sex makes men and women interested in each other, right? It's the rare individual who, I met somebody, well, were they a man? Or, you know what, I didn't notice. And we have to deal with that sometimes and men are particular as like, you know what, she's quite attractive. And we have to be careful with what we do with that. Nothing wrong with noticing that somebody is attractive, but we don't want to go any farther with that. Women are more likely, yes, he's, quite handsome. They do not have, the same problem that men tend to have. And so we are interested in each other, but as men and women, we're interested in each other in different ways. They need each other. We cannot live without men and women. The novel Lord of the Flies tends to be, or we tend to think of it as people in isolation tend to turn into savages. What that book is really about is boys who are separated from adult supervision and the influence of women, girls, become savages. So men and women need each other, and we're going to end up on that point later. They need to cooperate with one another, and they have to consider each other. That's a big, big point. Men need to consider women and the kind of creatures that women are, and women need to consider men and the kind of creatures that they are. That can create problems sometimes, right? Why does she act the way she acts? Why does he act the way he acts? We've got to learn to get together and work it out. That makes us better people. Lastly, sex is consequential. Sex is a very public act. It's a provocative statement. No, it's a very private act. People do it behind closed doors. They do it typically in the dark. But no, sex is a very public act that has public consequences. Again, what people do sexually behind their own bedroom doors doesn't affect anybody else. Oh my goodness, yes it does. Because sexuality is one of the most powerful things that human beings can participate in. And it has public consequences. We're going to talk about that. It bonds and isolates people. Okay, even in a one-night stand, people are bonded emotionally together. And they give part of themselves away, and the other person takes a part of that person away. Any of you who have had previous sexual experience before you got married, those images, those experiences, they stay with you. And oftentimes you have to fight them. The other is it isolates people. And this is what the anthropologists say. Marriage takes people off the sexual market. Okay? Think about this. You're in a bar and, you're there and you're in the sexual market, but you see somebody with a ring on their finger. You, regardless of what you may ultimately do in approaching that person, it makes you think. Okay, why are they here? They're off limits. Are they really off limits? Why, a ring on somebody's finger says, okay, that's a unique person in the sexual marketplace. No ring on the finger, it's like, you know what? Open game. It's interesting, my wife, her ring doesn't fit her. She would hate for me to tell you that because her fingers have just gotten a little bit bigger than what they were, and we haven't fixed it, her ring, so that she can wear it. She was at Chick-fil-A a couple mornings ago, and this guy asked her if she would be interested in going out to dinner sometime. She said, no, I'm married and I have 5 kids, thank you. he approached her because, she didn't have a ring on her finger. So marriage and the ring takes people off the market. It isolates them. It protects them. It says this person is not approachable. It brings the people together who make the new people. Very, very critical. It means that the people who made me, and they just happened to be a man and a woman, marriage kept them together. Okay? Shotgun weddings, remember? It binds man and woman together to stick together, to support one another, and to raise their common children. That is why every culture everywhere has something called marriage. Because in every culture everywhere, women are attracted to men are attracted to women, sex happens, babies happen. They need to find a way to make sure that the man who impregnates the woman and the woman who gets impregnated have a way to stick together in a public act that the community realizes, okay, we heard you make that commitment. You can't just walk away from it. That is what marriage is, basically. The next is sex must be regulated. There is no culture that can survive more than a generation or thrive more than a generation if it's do whatever you want to do sexually and there's no consequences. Now, here in our culture, not just in America, but largely in the West, and it's increasing as it's happening in Japan, it's happening in China as prosperity comes along. Sexuality is becoming free. Sexuality is becoming open. And it largely is the only ethic that we have is mutual consent. As long as an individual consents to a sexual act or to perform a sexual act, who can say anything about it? That is a culturally radical idea that has never been able to sustain itself. So, we know these things about sexuality. It's a public thing. It has consequences. It brings us together. It's powerful. And because it's powerful, it needs to be regulated. Now, who regulates it? This is about regulation. This is an anthropologist, and I do a lot of work in anthropology because I'm fascinated in basic human culture, taken apart from modern culture and all the developments. What is it that human beings have just basically created without high levels of education, without technology, without entertainment and things like that? That's what anthropologists study. And this anthropologist, who has been working in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, Ward Goodenough, he says, in all societies, there is a need to determine who has sexual privileges with whom and on what occasions. It's a profound statement that he makes and anthropologists make about every human society. It's not just because they're conservative, or it's not just because they're traditional. It's because they realize human sexuality is powerful. In all society, they need to determine who has sexual privilege with whom and on what occasions. He goes on to say, everywhere, finally, criteria of some kind are needed by which to determine where a child belongs, in what groups he has membership rights. That's where illegitimate children or legitimate children, it's not saying anything about the children themselves, but, okay, we know who this child belongs to. This child over here, we don't really know who the father is. We're not even sure who the mother is, Needed by which to determine where the child belongs, in what group he has membership rights, and what adults are responsible for maintenance, socialization, education, and for the protecting his interests and enforcing his rights. This speaks to the social impact that sex has. Peter and Sorokin, he was one of the guys who helped found the the study of sociology, pardon me, and he started the sociology department at Harvard. He's a Russian scholar, but came here to study. He says, and this is interesting, the American Sexual Revolution, but it was published in 1956. How could he have published a book about the American Sexual Revolution when it hadn't started yet in the 60s? American Sexual Revolution had been going on since like the 10s and 20s. Took a little break with World War I and the Depression, but then it kind of started up again. Okay? He says the regime that confines sexuality with socially sanctioned marriage and that morally disproves and legally prohibits pre- and extramarital relations provides an environment more favorable for creative growth of a community. He says that is a sociological, cultural truism. That when you see that a culture puts boundaries around sexuality and sexual expression and sexual practice, the energy and the creative power of that society, that culture, increases. That's another reason why all cultures have marriage. They realize that it channels human creativity and energy in a good, positive direction. The power of a woman. Okay, so we have sexuality is a very powerful thing. And like fire, it can either do great good, has great power, it can run a steam engine, or it can cause great damage. Last 2 summers, we've had crazy wildfires in Colorado Springs. I mean, horribly destructive. Sexuality is like that. It can be phenomenally wonderful, as we know, and it can be very destructive. How do women regulate sexuality? They are the regulators of it. And that's not a responsibility, it's a privilege, as we're going to see. Women regulate sexuality by determining which men will have access to sex when and under what circumstances. Think about that. That power and that decision-making is the most powerful force in the universe. Human-wise. Think, tell me anything that you think is powerful human-wise, and it all goes back to the relationship of a man and a woman. Steve Jobs revolutionized the world, Leonardo da Vinci revolutionized the world. Well, those 2 men and lots of others came from a woman saying yes to a man. Or the other is saying no to a man. Everything happens from that intersection, okay? Now, women culturally and universally have that power. Margaret Mead, in her book, Male and Female, published in 1968. This just fascinates me. In these primitive societies where she went to go study, before marriage, it is the girl who decides whether she will or will not meet her lover under the palm tree or receive him with necessary precautions into her house or into her bed. It's the woman who makes that decision. Okay, men? That's power. Okay, how come she gets to have that power? It's just always been that way. And hopefully, it will always be that way. Here she goes on. He may woo, plead, he sends gifts and pretty speeches by an intermediary, but the final choice remains in the hands of the girl. A mood, a whim, a slight disinclination, and the boy is disappointed. But in marriage, all this changes. She's not saying that the man then takes control, but the woman and the man become equal players. She is giving him access to her. And that way they become equal players. prior to that or prior to her giving herself, she's the one that holds that power. She's the one that can, as we're going to see in a minute, set that price. So, how do we know that that's true, that all cultures do it? Well, men who take sex by physical power are seen the same in every human culture. There's no culture where we think, good for you, guy. You know, that is a pro-social thing. That is the strength of a man to just go get the sex that he wants. In no culture are they idealized either by male or female. This guy, Donald Brown, he wrote a book, one of the leading books on human universals, which we talked about. He says sex is seen human universally. Sex is seen as a service given by females to males, females being the limiting source. A young woman acting coy or flirting with her eyes does it in a way you would recognize quite clearly. What he's saying there is that a woman is the limiting factor of sexuality. You know, she turns the floodgates on and off, and she does it in very subtle ways. And men have understood those ways forever. And the men that don't understand it are still single today. You know, it is just a look. It is just a tilt of the head. It's just something she does with her eyes, and the clued-in male is like, okay, she got nothing for me, or, I think she's interested. And that is a lady. A lady does that. What about a woman who's like, hey guys, I'm here, anybody who wants me? She is not a lady, right? A lady is very subtle, and she's powerful in that. Brown's key phrase, women being the limiting source. It could also be phrased as women being the governing source. Women control the sexual economy. Here's a study. There's this course of study or this area of study, sexual economics. It's an interesting joining of words, but it's very important. Sexual economics. Economics is simply the exchange, the study of the exchange of goods. And at what rate and at what price are they exchanged where both feel like they're getting a good deal? Sexual economics. Sex as female resource for social exchange in heterosexual interactions. And this is 2004 study, but this is what they look at is what is the nature of the woman and her place in sexual economics. They say this, the initiation of the sexual relationship corresponds to a transaction in which men offer women other resources in exchange for sex. The date, let's go out and have dinner. I'll bring you flowers. I've got to take you out for a couple more times to give you a nice meal and flowers. And, you know, I've got to kind of bend to you. And, you know, guys, it's like maybe on the third date, fourth date, fifth date, you know, maybe, as guys say, maybe I'll get lucky, right? He has to pay the price the woman wants him to pay. And the highest price that a woman asks the man to pay is, I would love to sleep with you. I would love to move into your house. But here's two things I need first, a ring and a wedding and a reception. After that, I'm all yours, okay? The woman is setting the very high price, and she's getting what she wants. In general, the data suggests that male sexuality has no or little exchange value, whereas female sexuality commands a significant but fluctuating price. What does that mean? It means that if I'm at a college campus and I'm standing up here and I'm like, ladies, I am free to whoever will take me, okay? Come see me after the lecture. I'm probably going to be standing there a while because male sexuality freely, just has a very low price. You can't give it away. You've got to woo the woman to be able to give it away. Okay, the woman over here, gentlemen, I am free and open to whoever wants me. what is the dynamic in the room, right? I mean, just basic human nature. Male sexuality has no value whatsoever. You can't give it away. Female sexuality, oh my goodness, you know? It's like women at a clearance sale, you know? They're fighting over everything and trying to get it. Women and men's sexuality are valued differently, and these differences will organize the behavior of most individual societies. And it does. Women dictate the market price of a very important negotiated good for which men are willing to pay a great amount. But today in the hookup culture, women are taking that great resource and giving it away at basement bottom prices. Okay? That's like you having a resource. Hamburgers. Your restaurant sells the best hamburgers in town. In fact, I saw coming from the airport, you guys have the best hamburgers in the world. I'm going to have to go try one tomorrow. And if you're just giving them away, how much do they cost? They cost a penny. If you don't have a penny, we'll just give it to you. You know? Exchange never happens that way, but we're doing that with sexuality. So, how do women control the sexual economy? They run the cartel. They do. If the women come together and go, ladies, we got what they want, and they can't get it anywhere else. We want to set this bar high. And typically it's at marriage. And guess what? If you set the bar high there, men will respond. They've been doing it for millennia. But if you lower the price, guess what? Men will be quite happy to pay that price. In the hookup culture, what we have today, it's here's hamburgers. They cost a penny. If you don't have anything, that's fine too. Women giving sexuality away, absolutely free, no strings attached, because they don't understand who they are as women and the power that they have. Now, market dynamics of gender and the win and loss. In the market, women benefit in all ways when the commitment level in a relationship is high. In my book, Why the Ring Makes All the Difference, on the downsides of cohabitation, I say this, that marriage is the relationship on the woman's terms. Cohabitation is the relationship on the man's terms. The basic male nature, the unrefined, animalistic, basic male nature benefits, if you will, in a cohabiting or hookup culture. He gets as much as he wants, whenever he wants it, with as many people as he wants it. And in cohabitation, you know what? She's there all the time. I've got access to it regularly. She cleans my clothes. She cooks my food. And I don't really have any real commitment to her. And the woman ends up paying the price because she's giving herself away, but she's not getting the commitment and the respect that a husband typically does. In the market of sexuality, women benefit in all ways when the commitment is high. In the market of sexuality, the base male nature benefits when it is low. This is a very interesting study. This came out in 2009 in the American Economic Journal, and this is part of my work. I read these things. I love these things. It's the paradox of declining female happiness. And they call it the paradox. These are two people at the Wharton School of Business, University of Pennsylvania. And they wanted to look at that decade-wise general female happiness. Now, you would think in the feminist ideal, right? Women can write their own scripts. They can do whatever they want to do. They can get the jobs they want. They can go to school, things like that. You would think that female happiness would be just skyrocketing. What do you think these people found out? Women have traditionally reported higher levels of happiness than men, but they are now reporting happiness levels that are similar or even lower than those of men. The relative decline in well-being holds across various data sets and holds whether one asks about happiness or life satisfaction. Those are two ways of measuring that in different ways. Because you can even not have high life satisfaction but be happy. You can just be a naturally kind of happy person. So looking at it that way gives you a stronger picture. We find the relative decline in women's well-being is ubiquitous. Now, you guys know what ubiquitous means, right? Why? This is what they say. Finally, the changes brought about through the woman's movement may have decreased women's happiness. But it was the feminists that were supposed to make women happy, giving themselves away sexually and competing on the man's terms and not marrying and not requiring anything of the man. And guess what? Women's happiness declined because there is a female nature that is elevated, strengthened when she gets what she wants from the sexual and emotional and romantic relationship. When she is giving hamburgers away for free or a penny, guess what? You as the business owner, not so happy. This just isn't working. I thought people would be happy getting free hamburgers, and I thought my business would be great. Same thing with women. Okay, this just is not working. So, what is it that shapes men for the better? Think about this. Women control the sexual market. They set the price, and they can either set it low or high, and they have to get together on that. In fact, there was an interesting thing. The Ukrainian women, they said they were going to join together and not have sex with Russian men during this recent invasion. They realized that if they come and they can't find women here who will receive them and accept them, they will probably lose interest. They understood the power that they have, and they were exercising that power as political power. Very interesting. So, women control the price, they control the market, but what is it that improves the lives of men? What shapes men for the better? And I'm going to close with this. This is the last point. Gail Collins, she was the editorial page editor for the New York Times, the first woman to ever do that, and she still works for the New York Times. She wrote a wonderful book called America's Women, and it is a book that looks at the history of women and the way that women impacted American history. Not Dolly Madison and, the Betsy Ross and those kind of people, just everyday, run-of-the-mill women. And she was doing an interview on NPR one day on this book, and the interviewer asked her, so what is the fundamental role that women, the most positive, powerful role that they had in building America? She said, that's very easy, very simple, making men behave. Okay, she's from the New York Times, okay? They're not supposed to talk that way. So, my ears perk up. And he said, so in what ways? And she said, well, look at Jamestown. Jamestown, the mother country, sent men over to start the colonies in America, in this part of the world, as an economic venture. They expected the colonizers to come over here, start creating, start growing stuff, making stuff, sending it back to the mother country, and riches would happen. Well, they sent this guy, Sir Thomas Dale, in 1611 to go over to Jamestown. Why? Because no checks were coming to the mother country from the colonies. So, James, why don't you go over there and see what's happened? Have they all died? Have they been killed by the Indians? What's happening? Why aren't we getting goods back? So, Mr. Thomas Dale went over there and he reported back to the mother country this: the men are involved in their daily and usual works, which is bowling in the streets. I mean, that's just awesome, you know? Because it's like, okay, guys, we got to start planning some stuff. We got to start building things. We got to start hunting. Let's do it tomorrow. It's a nice day. Let's bowl, you know? Men do that kind of stuff, okay? And when he came, Collins says that the first women who came marooned, they were marooned in what must have seemed like a long, rowdy fraternity party, minus the food and minus the drink. What happened was the mother country said, we know how we can get the men working. We're not going to send, drivers, crack the whip and get them working. We're going to send women. And the men will be interested in the women, and the women will set the tone for what the men should do. You know what? Before you have access to me, I want a nice cabin, and I want to be able to cook stew, tomorrow. So the men have to start doing, and that's what they did. And one thing led to another. The women got men to work. They got them to buckle down, and 200 years later, boom, we have America, one of the greatest nations, the greatest nation in the world. Why? Because women showed up and got men doing what men are supposed to do. That is what marriage does. As women run the sexual economy, which sexual social value do they universally desire? Monogamy. Monogamy is growing in developing nations. Men make nearly all the laws in all nations, but men are more interested in sexual diversity, having access to many women at a time. So why do men create laws that enforce monogamy? About 2 years ago, some scholars asked that question. Why is monogamy growing in the world as men are the ones that make the rules? They published this study, The Puzzle of Monogamous Marriage. It's published at early 2012. And here's what they said. Normative monogamy, the ideal, the norm of monogamy, reduces crime rates, including rape, murder, assault, robbery, and fraud, as well as decreasing personal abuse. By assuaging competition for younger brides, normative monogamy decreases the inequality to females in many important measures. By shifting male efforts from seeking and collecting wives to paternal investment and caring for women, normative monogamy increases savings, child investment, and economic productivity. Again, that is when women argue for and get what they want, one man committed to her, good things happen for the society. So, what is it that shapes men for the better in every single human society at every time? It's women. And they do it through marriage and through domesticity. Okay? Young men in gangs are typically not married young men. Okay? Just the opposite. But married men tend to be better men. They tend to buckle down. They tend to concentrate on the things they need to concentrate on. I remember Jackie, for me, I started school when I was 28. Jackie and I got married when I was 20. After a while, Jackie said, I'm going to want kids. I don't know if you do, but I'm going to, and you're going to give me kids, and I want a house that we own to raise our kids in. That means you're going to have to go to college. That means you're going to have to get a real job. I didn't walk away, because I like Jackie. I said, okay, yes, ma'am. And I started, and I did okay. I never thought I would be doing what I'm doing today. But it was Jackie who cracked the whip and got me going. Now, I want to end with 2 quotes. George Gilder, his book, Men in Marriage, he says, once the man marries, he can change. He has to change. For his wife will no longer have him if he remains in the spirit of a single man, right? He must settle his life and commit it to the needs of raising his family. He must exchange the moral and spiritual rhythms of the hunt for a higher, more extended mode of sexual life. He must submit, ethically and sexually to the values of maternal morality and futurity. That changes and molds men. Here's the last conclusion. And George Gilder is brilliant, and that book is really remarkable, Men in Marriage. He says, women control not the economy of the marketplace, which feminists wanted them to learn to do, and then they would become really powerful. No, they control the economy of eros, the life force in our society and in our lives. What happens in the inner realm of women finally shapes what happens on our social surfaces, determining the level of happiness, energy, creativity, morality, and solidarity in the nation. These values are primary in any and every society. And here's the punchline. When they deteriorate, all the king's horses and all the king's men cannot put them back together again. The balance and the relationship and the economic and relational sexual exchange between men and women is the most important thing happening in any culture. And when we let it go, we let our culture go. When we cherish it and watch that market, good things happen for men, for women, for our children, and for the community. Women are the most powerful human force in the universe because they are women and the way women are wired. Thank you. And I know we're a little bit late, but yes, sir.
Obviously, you do this very presentation on college campuses.
Mm-hmm.
The way you started out with us. After they've done the moving and hissing and continue with this, what's the end reaction?
It's very interesting. I have people come up to me and go, you know what? I don't agree with anything that you said, but you have given me a lot to think about. And the thing is I mean, they've never heard this stuff. They've just never heard it. And so for me, that is a very successful evening, you know. One is, okay, this pro-family guy comes from Focus on the Family, and he's not quoting chapter and verse, and he reads other things than the Bible, and he seems to know what he's talking about. In fact, he seems to know more than I know, you know. And that's a positive thing for, like, okay, conservative Christians like ourselves. But the other thing is, guy, there's bigger ideas out there than just what your one professor is telling you. I like to call it the new fundamentalism. That's what liberalism is on the campus. I don't want to hear anything else but just what my professor tells me and what I want to know or what I think I need to know, you know? Don't confuse me with other bigger facts. Christians, though, are more interested today in learning different things. The liberals on campuses, they're not. It is a very rigid kind of fundamentalism. So that's the big part of that work that's fun, is give them something to think about. So, but it is fun. I mean, I love it because you can just blow people's minds in terms of, yeah, there's all kinds of interesting ideas out there that go contrary. And the women connect. They're like, you know what? He's right. Because they know their female heart. And they know that the hookup culture and that them growing up as latchkey kids when their mom, you know, wanted to go off and assert her independence, that didn't work for them. You know, they know these things. So, thank you. Yes, sir.
You make your case very clear. My question is, what about us poor men? What's our bargaining chip? I'm serious.
Yeah. I mean, this stuff fascinates me because it's so important. The bargaining chip is the gentleman, becoming the gentleman, okay? It is like, it's like Lord of the Flies. I mean, I love that example if you're familiar with that story, okay? There's all these little boys, and they just turn into savages. If there had been one little girl on that island, okay, she would have changed the whole nature. And there would be the cocky, arrogant boys, well, I'm going to win you over just by my absolute coolness. What is she going to do? You know what? You're an idiot, okay? So the other boys see him get shot down. You've got the other boy over here who's, he's kind, he's nice. He's not, he's not a Betty. He's got some masculinity about him, but he's not super macho. He's considerate, he's thoughtful. He asks her about her day. He's watching out for her. He's the one who's going to get her attention. And the other guys are like, it's actually working. I'm going to start being like that. Manners exist because women exist. Just absolutely plain out. And so the bargaining chip for the man is becoming the man that a woman wants him to become, okay? My situation, I grew up as a skateboarder in the panhandle of Florida, surfer, I was a good kid, didn't get involved in drugs, didn't do bad things, but that was my life. School, I didn't spend a whole lot of time in that. And so I continued in that after I got married, and Jackie said, you know what, Glenn, here's how it's going to be. And what did I do? Okay, I guess I'm going to have to go to college. I was scared to death of college. Didn't think I could survive there. Didn't think I could compete there. But this woman was making me do something, this either or, and so I went and did it, and I became a better person. Again, I would never have imagined that I get to do the things that I get to do today. Written a number of books, things like that. But I am who I am because Jackie said, not you can do it, you will do it, And every man here knows that that's true. So the bargaining chip for the man is, it's going to work out better for me if I be what she wants me to be. It's quieter at home. She's more likely to, make the kind of food that I like. I'm going to get physical access to her more often. And that sounds simplistic, but you know what? There are those things. So the guy's bargaining chip is to be a guy. And guess what? He finds out that it works pretty well for him. And he's happier than his free bachelor friends, right? So. Yes, sir. Yep. I hope he does change, and I'm going to change him. There is a movie, and it's, if you're on Netflix, if you have Netflix, it's an instant view movie. It's called Arranged, and it's a beautiful movie about these two young girls. One comes from a very conservative Jewish family, one from a very conservative Indian family, and they both start their first teaching year at a school. So that's how they come together, and their families are going to set them up with their husbands. And it's, they're going to pick the guys, and the women get to choose. But it's this very sympathetic story of, this is not a bad way to be, okay? And the girls are seen as freaks in their community, but at the end of the movie, guess what? The last scene is they're sitting with their baby strollers at the park, and the kids are playing, and the husbands are playing with the kids. And the last scene is, yep, we're pretty powerful. Our husbands do what we tell them to do. And it's phenomenal that these people who, don't have traditional ideas or Christian ideas, the movie makers, they get that. And it's a beautiful movie. It really is. I mean, it's just a pure, nice, good story arranged. But that's exactly it. I've never thought about it this way. She comes forward, I hope you never change. The wife, I'm going to make you change. And I always say that is like, in Denver, Broncos Stadium. You fill that stadium up with husbands and wives that have been married 30 years or more, and you ask the question, are men better when they become husbands? Or men, did your wife make you a better person than you were before you got married? The place will erupt in laughter. And not because it's a silly question, but because it's an obvious question. The men know the answer, and the women know the answer. And again, that's the power of a woman. And what's interesting is it's typically the woman, and a lot of you, okay, you don't think, okay, I've not had much impact in the world. I'm not this strong, assertive woman. But you have shaped lives that are going to go out into the world, going to go out into the generations. There's nobody else who wields that kind of power. And that's necessary. That's essential. And women, to be real, true feminists and power, they need to understand that. They need to get that. Any last question? Thank you very, very much. It's been my privilege and honor to be able to come, and God bless you for coming. Absolutely.
Well, thank you, and I hope that you enjoyed it as much as I did, and inspired to dig a little deeper. And as I shared at the very outset, I think those of us in this room at the beginning, we do look to our faith, and scripturally and ethically we believe in marriage. And yet, as time has progressed over the last number of years, we have to be able to share why we do. And this was just a poignant time for us over the last hour to understand that this is a very complex union between man and woman, and yet there's so much that we can understand about it and really help us in that endeavor. So we'll finish with prayer, and then we'll be out in the hallway here for a little bit if you have any other questions of Glenn, as well as if you're new here and you don't know as much about North Dakota Family Alliance, I'd be happy to visit with you about that. We are associated with Focus on the Family Research Council, and ADF, and we say, but given we only have a couple of staff members, we say we try to do what they do on this national level, we try to do on the state level, but that's pretty difficult with about 2.5 staff members, but we try to do that. And of course, many of you know that, especially during the legislative session, we're here working on public policy and working on government relations, which so many of you have helped. But I'd sure be, it would make me proud to think that you would align yourself with what we do and support our efforts here as well as you do Focus on the Family. So let's close with a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, we do humble ourselves, and we do look upon you as the creator of all. You created the earth and everything that is in it, and you created your most prized creations, and that is man. And you want us to prosper, and you've really put us here for really one purpose, and that's to glorify you and your name. So every day we have an opportunity to do that. And today that opportunity, I would hope, has to do with, we look at the issue of life, which you have created, and you look at the issue of marriage, which you have created, as Glenn has shared so eloquently, not just for Christians, but for all. And innately, you have put in the deepest, darkest places in Africa and Asia, or wherever it might be, all know that man and woman are meant to be together and to perpetuate the future for your kingdom and for your glory. So we just thank you for those truths. We just ask you for the courage that we might stand for you and what you have for us, that we might speak out for you, and that sometime in the near future we can do that in a meaningful way as we look to carry out your word and what we find in Scripture. So thank you for all who have been here tonight. I want to especially pray for Carly, who is with me tonight, who you've all met. Carly is going to be leaving us in the very near future to take on another mission that she and her husband are embarking upon, as well as she'll become a brand new mother in just a couple of months. I want to specifically lift her up and pray for a healthy child and just that her future endeavors are richly blessed. So thank you, Lord, for Carly and all of you that have come here tonight. So it is in the name of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, that we pray. Thank you, Jesus. Amen.